ठीक है,
सही।
you can start now. Hmm. Wait, Dinesh.
हाँ हाँ,
When we are going to start, like,
यू आर फ्री टू गो, ओवर टू यू।
okay,
So yes, I am Ashish, and I here with Aditya Kumarsi and Daksh Garg will represent the first workshop of SpyBits. And firstly, we will start with Python because Python is very necessary in cryptography. So, we will start with the basic of Python. So this is an introduction to Python. Mainly, Python is an open source scripting language. Open source means you do not have to pay anything for using a Python. And scripting language is actually a programming language in which the Python is actually act as interpreter, in which every if you write 100 line of code in Python, then it can be executed one by one. That is interpreter. And Python is created by Guido van Rossum in 1991. Python is a very popular language that it is used for many purposes. Like you can use Python in web development, image processing, game development, and developing a graphical user interface, and in many different things. It is also used in cryptography because it offers many different library which you can use for better encryption and decryption techniques. That's why we are giving a brief intro to Python. So one of the statement about Python is that Python is easy to use, that it is very user friendly and you can learn Python very easily. Like if there is some beginner who want to learn some programming language, that so he can easily learn Python, such like that if he want to learn Java programming language. So for printing a simple statement like hello world, he have to learn so much of different things. But in Python, you can simply write print hello world and you will get the required output. And Python is powerful because today many big tech companies are using Python. So if you get a placement in such company, then you are going to work in Python and different framework that is coded in Python. Python is versatile. That means as I already told you that Python is used in many different purposes. So you can use Python in image processing such that you can see these two pictures. This is very much clear than this. So you can use Python for image processing in data science and in game development. This is a game development which are using
आशीष
the
कौन सी
module
आशीष एक मिनट,
uh,
कौन सी स्लाइड पे अभी?
slide 7.
अभी देख, स्क्रीन पे 3 शो हो रहा है एक्चुअली।
ओके, देखता हूँ
क्या भैया नहीं दिख रहा?
एक मिनट।
एक काम कर, डायरेक्ट पीपीटी अपलोड कर दे, समझ रहे?
नहीं नहीं, वील अपलोड द पीपीटी लेटर, वोंट बी अ प्रॉब्लम।
No, I am saying about the upload, like he is using Google, no, like screen sharing. So I am talking about direct upload the PPT.
अच्छा, ओके।
Maybe the view will get something better than this.
Or maybe you can download the PPT and
हाँ,
upload it directly through the share tray.
wait a minute.
Just a minute, guys.
So is it visible now? Yeah. Aditya, is it visible?
हाँ सही है.
Mm. Okay, let's go. So Python is a versatile language. That means you can use Python for many different purposes. Like you can use in image processing. Like you can see these two pictures. That one is very much clearer than other because we have applied some blur in this. You can use Python in data science also, and you can use Python for game development and different machine learning like natural language processing. So Python have different libraries. So you have to learn about different libraries and go through the documentation to do anything. So for using Python, you need to have some IDE or text editor. Like many PCs have already installed Python. You can check if there is already installed Python or not in the command prompt if you are using a Windows, or in terminal if you are using Linux, by using this command Python and Python version. Or you can install Python from the Python website like python.org. So you can use a Sublime text editor, which is a very famous text editor. In Sublime you can code it is in Python or C++ or whatever you can do it in Sublime. Some of the popular IDE that is famous for Python are PyCharm, Anaconda, Spider. If you can install any of the IDE based on your interest. So here we will come about the Python variables and data types. What are variables? Like variables are container for storing data values. Variables actually store some data for which you have to apply some operation. Like if you want to add two numbers a plus b, then here a and b are the two variables that will be declared in Python. And Py- and Python has no command for declaring variable like other language. Like in C++, you will have to declare a data type like int a is equal to 5 or something like that, string or character. But in Python, you do not have to especially specify which data type you are declaring. In Python, you can simply assign some data and Python will automatically detect which kind of data type you are assigning to it. Python has following data types which is built in by default. You can use string for text, numeric type like integer, float, or complex. Integer is for normally int type, and float is for the decimal type, and complex is for complex number like a plus ib, something like that. You can also use sequence type data type, which store a list type like array in. If you know about C or C++, then there is an array that to store many numbers. So here is a list that work for that. So we will discuss about all the data type in the next slides. So this is a Python number. So there are three numeric data type in Python, that is integer, float, or complex. Like here we are not declaring the integer like int x equal to 1 as we do in the C or C++ language. Here we will assign 1 to x, and it will automatically, Python will automatically know that we are assigning an integer value to x. Such we can do in to the float value and complex. We can know which data type we are using the type function. Like if we do print type x, so in the output it will show that which data type is of type x, or x is of which data type. Similarly for y and z we can know the data type. So this is a string. A string is generally used for storing a character or a word or a sentence. You can use a single quote, one single quote to store a character or a sentence, but you have to use a three quotes, either single or double quotes, to store multiple line strings. Like you can see here, the string are stored in the form of character wise character. Like if you save the string a is equal to hello, then hello will be stored at hello, and its indexing will start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Like 0, at a 0 place h will be there, at one place e will be there, and similarly like that. So if you want to know what appears at the first place in this string, you can print a1, and this will give you e, because the string index start from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is all about the string. Python also have boolean data type. Boolean store only two type of different variables like true and false. This is used generally to check the equation if it is either true or false. Like you can see here, there is a equation in which it is written that 100 is greater than 10, and if it is true, then it will print true, and if it is false, then it will print false. Here you can also use type dataset to note a data type. Here it shows that 100 is equal to 10, it is false, and the data type of false is a boolean type. In real, string has also some boolean data type. Like if we want to know the what data type is hello, hello is a string at it is closed in the double quote, so it is also a boolean data type, and the boolean value of hello is true. So like in C or C++, there is an array to store a large number of different kind of data, so Python have a list in it. You can store multiple items in a single variable. Like if you want to save a thousand of numbers, so you are not going to declare a thousand of different variables to store that number. So list is a simple way to store all that number. Lists are created using a square bracket. As you can see that this is a square bracket in which every element are present, and the first element is at index 0 and second at 1, and correspondingly the list items are indexed from 0 to n, and whatever the size of the list will be. List The property of list are that list element items are ordered. That means if you append some element in the list, then it will, if you iterate through that list, then it will appear correspondingly as you append these items. And
हेलो
you can
आशीष,
change. Yes.
ये कुछ कुछ मैसेजेस आए हैं चैट में, डाउट है उसको भी क्लियर कर देना।
साथ में
अभी कर देते हैं।
अच्छा ठीक है, देखते हैं।
ये 1:4 में क्या होगा ना आर्यमन, वो पूरा वो 1 से लेके लेस देन 4 तक के इंडेक्स में जो भी एलिमेंट है वो एक साथ वो स्लाइस करके प्रिंट कर देगा।
Okay, so this yeah, in the string, so in the string the boolean value of this is a space, and a space is not an empty, so the boolean value of a space is also true, and this is not a space, this is an empty string, so the boolean value of empty string is false. so that it is writing false in the place of, if we check the boolean value of a empty string. And if any string that you will write, he has the boolean value of true, and an empty string has boolean value false. Okay. Yeah, so we are talking about the list. So list items are indexed, and you can change the item of list uh, by getting it indexed. Like the index, apple is at 0 index, and banana is at 1 index, and cherry is at 2 index. So if we print the string, it will appear in ordered way in which we have put the element in the list. And we can get the element of list by using it index in a square bracket. So the element at a place 1 is banana, so we can get it. We can also change the list by getting its index. So we have changed the banana to mango, so the new list will be like this if we print that. And to append an element in the list, we can use the append function. It is generally used to add the element to the list, and the new list will increase, the size of the new list will be increased. And list can also store a duplicate values, like there are two mango in the list. And a list can store different data types at the same time. Like it is not you can also store different data type. Like you can also store integer, string, boolean type in the same list. So Python tuples are generally like list, but some of the property that the tuples are unchangeable. But you can change the list by, as you have seen in the list, that I we can change the item of the list if once assigned. But in the tuple, in the tuple we cannot change the element if we once specify the tuple. So tuples are like list, but the only one property that make different the tuples from the list, that it is unchangeable. So this is tuple. You can also tuples are also indexed. You can get each element of the tuple by getting its index in the square bracket. Len is function that is used to get the length of any list tuples or any other data types. So now comes Python set. As you have read about set in mathematics, that set it stored unique element in it. So set are declared with a curly bracket. As you can see in the set are stored in curly bracket. Set are generally unordered. That means you can see here that I have first stored ABC, then 34, true, and then 40, and then male. And if I print the set, then it will not appear at I have written the element in it. First true will appear, which is at index 2, and then 34, which is at index 1. So it is unordered. Like in the tuple, you can see if we print the tuple, it will appear as I have specified in it. But set are unordered, and you cannot change the set element by getting it index, because set element are not indexed. This is a property of unordered, that the item in set do not have a definite order, and you cannot get the element by any index or keys. So now it's coming about Python dictionary. So dictionary is also a data type in Python, which are used to store data in the term of key and value pair. It is like a function in, you have studied about set relation and function in mathematics. So dictionary are like function in mathematics in which you will map a key to its value. So dictionary is actually a collection of unordered. Dictionary is also unordered. Like you can see here, we have assigned different data to the dictionary, and if we will go on printing this data, we will not get as we have written in the dictionary. You can change the element of dictionary by using it key, and dictionary do not allow a duplicate values. Like if we want to assign the same key to a different value, then it will overwrite that value. It will not, like repeat itself. It will update its values. So you can see here. So next we will come about the Python operators. Python generally have 7 operators like arithmetic operator, assignment operator, comparison operator, logical, identity, membership, and bitwise operator. We will discuss about this in the next slides. So this is Python arithmetic operator. As you all already know that the operator are addition operator, multiplication. You already know about this kind of operator. And this is a modulo operator which will give you the remainder when a number is divided by another. Like when you divide x by y, you will get the remainder. Like when you are calculating 10 modulo 3, then it will give you 1 as an answer, because the remainder will be 1 when you do calculation 10 modulo 3. It is a exponential operator. Like if you want to calculate 5 to the power 2, which is 25, so you can do that. Yes, keys should be unique. If you are assigning different value to a same key, then it will overwrite the values for that key. You cannot have the same key repeated number of times. And it is a float division. Like when you divide an element by another, you will get the greatest integer function of that division. You will not get the answer in decimal, you will get the answer in form of integer. So this is a Python assignment operator. Generally, assignment operator is used to assign any value to a data type. Like you can see here, the equal is equal to operator. It is used to assign a value of 5 to x in the example. You can see here that it is easy to see that. And this all are the mathematical operator that are used with the assignment of operator. And we will discuss about these last 5 operator in the bitwise operator. Yes, so we come to Python comparison operator. Comparison operator is generally used for comparing two different things. Like this is a equal to operator. It is used to check if two data types are two values are equal or not. And this is a not equal operator, greater than, less than, greater than equal to, and less than equal to. It is generally used for comparing the values. And this is a Python logical operator. Generally, logical operators are used to combine two or more different conditional statements. And you can see here AND operator. It will return true if if all the statements are true. Like you can see the example here. If x is equal to 4, then it will return true because 4 is less than 5 and also 4 is less than 10. So it will true 4 is less than 5 and true is also true. If any of the condition is false, then it will return false. This is a OR operator. It will return true if any of the statement is true. Like if you get 4.5 in the place of x, then 4.5 it will be true and it will return false, but this is true, so it will return true. And not statement generally reverse the result. If you get a true, then it will convert it into false. Like if there is 4 in the place of x, then this statement will be true and not will reverse the statement. That means it will return false if x is equal to 4. So Python identity operator are generally used to check if the two data types are with the same memory location or not. Generally, Python has some property that if you assign like a is equal to 5 and you assign b is equal to a, then a and b will be the value at the same memory address. So it is to check if a and b are at the same memory or not. And generally is not also is used for the reverse of is. So here Python membership operator. Membership operator is generally used to test if a sequence is presented in an object or not. Like if you are using a list and that list contains a number from 1 to 10, and if you want to know if either a number exists in the list or not, then you can check if, like if I want to check if 5 is in the list or not, then you can write a statement like if 5 is in the list or not. Like if 5 in the list, and you can write the data type, like variable name in the list place of list, and it will return true if it is present and it will return false if it is not present in the list. And this is a Python bitwise operator. You will learn about the bitwise operator in the later workshop for the SPY bits. So you can see this is a generally AND operator which you have learned in the Boolean expression about Boolean expressions. It is an AND operator, like it will set each bit if both the bits are 1. OR operator, it will set each bit if either the bit is 1, either of the bit will be 1. And it is a JOR operator which will set 1 if only one of the two bit is 1, and it will inverse all the bits of a number. If it is 1, it will convert it into 0 and vice versa. This is a left shift operator and this is right shift operator. It is generally used to shift all the element, that means all the bit of the number either to the left or to the right. So it will shift all the bits to the left by one position, and it will shift all the bits of an element to the right position. So here comes the conditional statement. How you will check the condition if some statement is true or false. So Python offered a if else condition state. So if you can check the condition using equal to, Python offers different mathematical expression to express the condition. You can check here the different conditions: equal to, not equals, less than equal to, greater than, and greater than equal to. Like you can see here in the code, if a is assigned 200 and b is equal to 33, so you are checking the condition if b is greater than a. 33 is not greater than, so it will return false. So this code will not go into that portion, it will check the next statement, else if statement, and it will check if a is equal to b. Now 33 is not equal to 200, so it will also return false. So the code will execute in else statement and it will print a is greater than b. So you will notice that there is a space in this code, so this is called an indentation. Python generally relies on indentation to define the scope of in the code. In other language you will use curly bracket, like in C or C++, you will use C language. You will use curly bracket for this purpose. So here because comes about the loop. Like if you are using a list and you want to get each element of the list, so you cannot get the element of list by specifying each by specifying its index, because if the list contain a millions of values, then you cannot code it for that. So Python offers loop for that purpose. Like Python offers two different commands for looping, while and for. The code for loop are like that. If you are having a list fruit and there are three different element in the fruit, so you can use for statement like that. For x in fruit, so so all the element will be assigned to the x one by one, and then you can print all the element. So for x in fruit, print x, it will print all the element one by one. For have some other syntax also, like for I in a range, I will be start from 0 and I will increase by 1 in each step, and it will check the condition until I will be less than the length of the this list. So it will length of this list is 3, so I will execute 3 times. So here it comes about while loop. So while also for same like for, you can see the syntax for using a while, and here is a use of break keyword. Like if you want to exit in the loop when certain condition is met, you can use the break statement. Like if you are iterating like I is equal to 1 and the condition is specified like I, while I is less than 6, print I. And if you want that if I is equal to 3, then you want to break the statement, break the code. So you can use this condition. When I will reach 3, it will return true and it will go into the inner scope of if condition and it will break from the loop. So finally Python, we will discuss about the function in Python. So function is a block of code which only runs when we call. You can see here we have introduced a function named my function. Function is introduced with a keyword def, in which in the function you can pass a parameter or argument. Like we have created a function like my function and we have passed an argument 3 and it will return us 5 times of the argument. So if we call that function by using the function name and pass an argument in the place of the parameter, then it will go and inform us that the function is called here, and it will multiply the argument parameter 5 times and it will return to the value a, and a will now become 5 times of 3 15, and it will print a. So that function are used. So here we have discussed briefly about the Python. If you want to learn more about the Python, you can go to the YouTube video for the Python, and if you prefer to tutorial, you can also go to the tutorial. Next, Aditya will represent the number theory. Number theory is also called the heart of cryptography. So, Aditya, start from here.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, there is good.
Yeah. Yeah, so coming on the number theory is very important. Whether you are you will talk about like cryptography, CTF, or competitive programming, or DSA, or any algorithm you want to study, you need a good knowledge of number theory to understand any algorithm or any even in puzzles. Also, many companies ask you questions that require a good number theory knowledge. So I think the number theory is an essential part in science because it involves a lot of math, and uh, for doing CP or crypto or anything, you are required to be very good at number theory because it is basic and good building block uh, for anything related to maths. No. So first we will going to discuss about modular arithmetic. So what is modular arithmetic? So starting from the very basic thing, what is my modulus? So suppose you have been given two numbers A and B. So modulus is that suppose we divide A by B. So whatever be the remainder that is left after dividing A by B is usually known as modulus. So if you have been given A and B, so A can be written as B into Q plus R. So in this, Q is the quotient and R is the remainder. So like you can see in this 9 mod 2, 2 will divide like by quotient 4 and 1 will be the remainder in this case. Similarly with the another case of 56, 56 mod 11 is the modulus that is left when we divide 56 by 11. So it will divide it by quotient will be 5 and remainder will be 1. So this is what we say is modulus. So coming on to basic properties of modulus, modulus follows the commutative property. Like if you want to calculate like w plus x whole mod n, so instead of doing that, you can also do x plus w whole mod n. Okay, and similar, it is of the case of additive case. In coming on to a multiplicative case, also it also follows the commutative property. Like for doing w into n, w into x whole mod n, you can also do it as x into w mod n whole mod n. So, and it also follows associative law. Suppose you can see that here w plus x whole plus y to the whole mod n. You can also write it as w plus whole of x plus y whole mod n. Similarly, in case of multiplication also, it also follows the associative law. It also follows the distributive law, like whole of w into x plus y whole mod n can be also written as uh, w into x plus w into y whole mod n. Okay. Now coming on to the identities of the modulus is that suppose identity in case of addition is that is zero. Suppose if a w number is given, so when we add zero to the w, the result does not change. It will remain same, like zero plus w mod n equal to w mod n. So this is a case of identity in addition case. Similarly, for multiplication also, uh, 1 is the identity here. You can do 1 into w whole mod n and it remains same as w mod n. Similarly, there also exists inverse or inverses also for additive, like when you add something and it gives a zero. when we divide by mod n. So that becomes the inverse of this for um, additive also. And in case of multiplicative, also any number is said to be like um, any number is said to be multiplicative inverse if it gives modulo, like if w mod n suppose if suppose if a number is w, so a number is said to be inverse in case of multiplicative if w into b whole mod n gives 1. So this is the condition for inverse in case of multiplicative thing. Coming on to the other properties, like this is a very essential property that you are required in doing any commutative programming questions or even in dealing with very large numbers. So suppose you want to do a plus b mod c, so you can get a benefit here by using the property of modulus, that instead of doing a plus b mod c, you can do a mod c plus b mod c, and then you can uh, take it modulus of whole by mod c. So both the things will give you same result. And in similar way in multiplication also, a into b whole mod c, you can write it as a mod c into b mod c whole, multiply them and then mod them with the take whole mod c. So both of them will going to give you similar result. In case of minus, suppose a minus b, you want to calculate a minus b mod c. So here, what you can do, you can take a mod c, then you can do minus of b mod c. But there may be the case that this terms become negative. So in that case, you need to add c into this. So now after adding c, the result become positive, and then you take the whole modulus with c. So this is the correct equation for a minus b. Mm, we have to do this because the modulus is also is going to be always in a range like 0 to c minus 1. It can't be like negative. So you are required to add c and then take again a modulo. So this is a very good practice that can save you from errors in any programming or uh, coding event or even in uh, maths also. Now coming on to the divide part, for calculating a by b whole mod c, you can't simply do a mod c divided by b mod c and to the whole mod c. This thing does not work in this way. Here in the divide case, you need to calculate actually the multiplicative inverse. So suppose the multiplicative inverse is like, it is written in yellow color like b inverse. It is actually called b inverse. What you do is that instead of dividing it by b mod c, you calculate the inverse of b, and after calculating the inverse of b, you actually multiply a with the inverse of b. So now you will multiply a mod c into inverse of b mod c, and then take the modulus by of whole by mod c. So if you can see that here, if you have been given a equal to 5, b equal to 3, and c equal to 2, okay, so it is a simple example. So instead of doing like 8 modulo 3, you can do 5 modulo 3. Instead of doing 8 modulo 2, which will come to 0, you can do 5 modulo 2, that is 1, plus add 3 modulo 2, that is 1. Then you can do 1 plus 1, 2, whole mod 2. So this is very simple property, but it plays a major role for doing questions that deal with very large numbers.
Mm, mm, mhm.
So mm, coming on to the congruence modulo is a very important thing that comes into play when we deal with the modulus thing. Suppose uh, this is an expression that we deal like a is said to be congruent with b mod c. So this equations a is congruent to b mod c, we say only when a mod c comes out to be same as the b mod c. So you can see that in this graph, in this diagram, the line like 0, c, 2, c, 3, c, 4, c, and this when you take modulo by c, so c mod c will give you 0 and 3c mod c will also give you 0. So you can say that C2, C3, C4, C are congruent with each other. Like C is congruent with 3C mod C. Okay. आशी स्क्रीन दिख रही है ना?
हाँ विजुअल है,
हाँ,
स्क्रीन दिख
किसी
रही
का
है।
मैसेज, किसी का नेटवर्क प्रॉब्लम।
हाँ भैया दिख रही
Is there anybody else who has this problem or just Kanchan? If anybody else has
भैया
this
me too.
problem,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am having the same problem.
अच्छा,
So that then maybe your network is not good because of that.
the network
You are not
problem
able.
is an issue. Screen share में दिख रहा था तो screen share ही कर दे क्या? Maybe.
कितनों को प्रॉब्लम आ रही है?
I think only 2 people have reported.
हाँ तो ये मे बी उनके नेट की वजह से हो रहा होगा। लोग विजिबल लिख
Try
रहे हैं,
joining
ठीक है?
from your laptop if you have a laptop. Try joining
या
from it. Right? Yeah.
लोग विजिबल लिख रहे हैं, ठीक है, चैट में, ठीक है। You are
Okay.
good. So continuing again, so you can see that 0C, 2C, 3C, 4C, these are said to be congruent with each other. Like some A and B, if they are going to be give same modulus when divided by C, then they are said to be congruent. So we will. Uh, so coming on to the basic properties of congruence, to understand congruence in a much better way. Suppose two numbers are be given A and B. So A and B are said to be congruent with modulo n if and only if A mod n that I have said earlier equal to B mod n. Okay, so then you can say that A is congruent with B to mod n. So congruences also follow some properties like uh, reflexive type of properties that you have studied earlier in maybe in school, like uh, uh, like when A is said to be congruent with B mod n, then also B can be, you can also set that B is also congruent with A mod n. So this is a symmetric property, you can say it. And there is also transitive property that if A is said, A is founded to be in congruence with B mod n, and B is founded to be in congruence with C mod n, then it comes out that A is also congruent with C mod n. So this is a transitive property. And and yeah, so if A is congruent with B mod n, then actually n will divide A minus B. You can check this easily by doing some math, simple math by your own. You can very easily check this condition by your own by taking some simple equations and checking by your own with pen and paper. So if A is congruent with B mod n and C is in congruence with D mod n, then their addition A plus C is also congruent with the B plus D mod n. And similarly, in multiplication also, AC will be congruent with BD mod n. And in case of when you will take the power, then 8 raised to the power k will also be going to be in congruence with B to the power k mod n. Okay, so these are the very good properties of congruence that are used in various stages of number theory. Now coming on to the modular exponentiation. So it's a very important topic. Suppose you want to calculate like x to the power n. Okay, you want to calculate x to the power n. So what you can do is that simply you can code a little bit like you using the property as discussed earlier. You can take modulo each time and multiply, and then take take modulo each time. You can by using that property you can calculate x to the power n in simply O(n) complexity. So what is O(n) complexity? Complexity tells us about how fast our code is, like how much operations it is going to take to solve a problem or a code. So as much as less the complexity of a problem, the lesser time it will take, and the good the more better it is said that it is more efficient code actually. So in this code you can see that it is defined mod xp. Yeah, it's a Python code where a function is defined mod exponent mod, whose three parameters are passed here: x and m. X is a base, n is the power, and m is the modulus, by which you are going to take the modulus. So you want to calculate x to the power n. So you can simply use a loop, use a recursive algorithm, or even a for loop by multiplying x n time. Like in this case, you will multiply x, then you will pass the pass to the modular exponentiation function x, then you will reduce a power by 1, then you will pass x n minus 1 n, and in a similar way x n minus 1 will pass x n minus 2 x n minus 3. In this manner, at each level it will multiply x and take mod, multiply x, then take mod. So it will, the complexity of this problem will going to become as on to calculate a problem. But this is not very good approach to calculate modulus, like of x to the power of n, when where n can be very large, like up to the power of 10 to the power 9, so, or 10 to the power 18 maybe. So in that case you can't even, you cannot find that value in a less amount of time. So what you can do instead of that, you can use a basic property of modular exponentiation, like a multiplicative property that we have studied earlier. uh, like 2 to the power 100 mod 7 can also be written as 2 to the power 50 into 2 to the power 50 whole mod 7. So instead of calculating 2 to the power 100, what you can do is that you can calculate 2 to the power 50, and you can, once you get the value of 2 to the power 50, you can simply multiply it again by the same value. So you are not required to calculate 2 to the power 100, but you can only work in 2 to the power 50 and multiply it twice. So 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 the complexity reduces half, if in this stage. Actually, in one stage it reduces by half. Actually, you don't need to calculate 100. You can satisfy the relation in n by 2 only, if suppose if the power is n. So what you can do, you can take the 2 to the power 50 mod 7, and then multiply it by 2 to the 50 mod 7 again, and then take the whole modulo 7. Suppose if the power is a odd number, then the similar case, slight, very slight modification can solve the problem. Like you only need 2 extra, 2 into 2 to the 50 into 2 to the 50. So you can simply found the power of 2 to the 50 mod 7, and then you can again multiply it by 2 to the 50 mod 7 and 2 extra because of the odd case. So in this case, instead of calculating 2 to the 100 type of thing, you can calculating a lesser power, and uh, using it to optimize your code very significantly. Actually, suppose the example given below is like 3 to the power 128. So what we are doing here is that 3 to the power 128 can be found by calculating 3 to the power 64. So if you know 3 to the power 64, you will put, suppose if 3 to the 64 is known by calculating that its mod is 4, so you will put that value and you will square it 16, and then you will take it mod 7, that comes out to be 2. Similarly, for 3 to the power 64 also, you are going to repeat this by using 3 to the power 62, then you are going to repeat it with 3 power 16 in a similar way until it gives you a, like, basic power, like 0. If the power comes out to be 0, you can simply return. So this function can be written recursively, like, yeah. So this is the function. So in this function, what is, you are given a base x, the power is n, and you are taking the modulo with m. So it checks that if the power is 0 or not. If the power is 0, you can simply return 1. 1 by 1, because it is a multiplicative identity, so you can simply 1 mod m is not going to change your answer. So if n equal to 0, you can return 1. But if n is not equal to 0, what you can do is that you can calculate you can call the same function. Instead of calculating x to the power of n, you can calculate x to the power n by 2. And mod will be, of course, with m. So you can check that if n is n modulo 2 equal to 0, it means that if n is even. if n comes out to be even, what you can do is that the result will be a into a mod m. And if the n is odd, so a into a, and you need an extra x because of the odd case, and then you multiply them and then take mod using the mod properties that we have discussed earlier. That mod can be taken break down by, instead of multiplying many numbers, you can multiply two numbers at a time and then use it to again multiply and take mod. So by using this property, what happens that at each level the the operation reduces by n by 2 at each level. So for 64, like in the previous example, for calculating 3 to the power 128, you can see that you only need around 6-7 steps approx. Okay, so in 7 steps, you are getting the value of 3 to the power 128. In the previous algo, the naive approach, you are required like 128 times. So you can see that 128 to 7, your complexity has been reduced very significantly. So this is a very strong feature. So the time complexity comes out to be log n in this case. Like, so for doing a like operations of like 10 to the power 9, you can do in just 32 operations. So this is a this takes very less time, so it makes your code very efficient and very faster. So using this, you can even calculate higher power to like 2 to the power of 10 to the power 18 by simply 2 to the power 10 to the power 18 mod something. You can easily calculate by this algorithm in just minimum time. So now coming on to the GCD, all of you have known about like GCD. It is known as greatest common divisor or highest common factor, whatever you can say. So GCD is a number. Suppose you have been given two numbers A and B. So GCD is a number that divides both of the numbers, and it is largest. Like, suppose many numbers divide both of the numbers, so it is the largest among them. Next, one point is that co-prime numbers. Two numbers are said to be co-prime when their GCD comes out to be 1. Like 8 and 15, their GCD comes out to be 1 because no number divides both of the numbers. So only one divides both of them. So their GCD is 1. So they are said to be co-prime. You can use also the powers to calculate GCD, like in school or old school method you have studied that. Suppose you can see that example that 300 is can be written as 2 to the power 1 raised to the power 1 into 3 to raised to the power 1 into 5 raised to the power 2, and 18 is written as 2 raised to the power 1 and 3 raised to the power 2. So what you can do that for every prime number, you can take the minimum power present among them. So you can use 2 to the power 1 for 2 case, 3 to the power 1 in 3 case, and 5 to the power 0, and multiply them and get the result. So what you can do is that you can, for each prime number that is less than n, you can take the common minimum power among two numbers and multiply it. So that will give you your GCD. So this is the basic property of GCD. So how to calculate GCD? In a naive approach, what you can do is that for calculating GCD, you can calculate the minimum of A and B. You can find minimum of A and B, and you can travel backward from minimum of a comma b to 1. And whenever a number I, suppose in this for loop, I from minimum of a comma b, it get decremented at each point, like I equal to m, then m minus 1, then m minus 2 until 1. It will going to decrement its value in a for loop. So whenever a I is found, they divide both the numbers like a and b. If a modulo I equal to 0 and b modulo I equal to 0, when both the condition is found to be true, then we get the answer, that is GCD equal to I, and we simply return this function returning that GCD. So this takes the complexity of like minimum of a comma b, because the for loop is running from m to 1. That is minimum of a comma b. So this is not a very good and fast approach. So there is a very good algorithm that is known as Euclid's algorithm. What it says is that for calculating GCD of a comma b, instead of calculating GCD of a comma b, you can also calculate GCD of b comma a mod b. So, you can see that in this function, a through two parameters are passed a and b. So if b is not found to be zero, what it does that it calculates GCD of b comma a mod b. So this equation can be easily proven by doing some simple math, like you can write two equations and by interchanging something, you can easily prove by pen and paper that yeah, this condition holds. So what it does is that it continues, like you can use it in a recursive manner. So when one value gets zero, then automatically the GCD comes out to be a. And like if you pass b comma a mod b, then if b becomes zero, then the GCD automatically becomes a. So you can return a. Understanding it, like uh, with an example, like you have been given a equal to 16 and b equal to 10. So GCD of 16 and 10 will be GCD of 10 comma 16 modulo 10 by Euclid's algorithm. So and GCD of 10 comma 6 will be GCD of 6 comma 4, and GCD of 6 comma 4 will be GCD of 4 comma 6 mod 4, that is 2, and GCD of 4 comma 2 will be GCD of 2 comma 0. So when another number comes out to be 0, you return GCD as first number, like in this case it is 2. So GCD of 16 comma 10 can be easily found to be 2. So so here complexity is reduces very much, like it reduces uh, like it comes out to be in log instead of on. Now coming on to the extended Euclidean algorithm. And this is a extended form of Euclid's algorithm. So you may find it a little bit tougher. So you may be required to go through it once, twice, thrice, maybe. So you can follow some kind of resources that we are going to give you later if you don't get it by now, because it may take multiple times maybe. Uh, Understand it by completely. It is a slightly difficult topic. So it says that any GCD can be written as a linear equation of two. Suppose if you want to calculate A and B GCD, like you want to calculate GCD of A comma B. So GCD of A comma B can be written as a linear equation of A and B, like A into X plus B into Y. So so extended Euclidean algorithm uses this linear equation very much. So a into x plus b into y equal to GCD of a comma b. It is a very important equation. So what it does is that suppose we suppose that a into x plus b into y equal to GCD of a comma b, and we know the Euclid's algorithm before that GCD of a comma b is going to be GCD of b comma a mod b. So using that property, now GCD of a comma b is equal to GCD of b comma a mod b. So we can also write another linear equation uh, of like b into x1 plus a mod b into y1 equal to GCD of a comma b. So after rearranging it by doing some math, which you can do by pen and paper by using yourself, it may need some time for you. So after rearranging it and doing some math, what comes out is that interesting is that it is rearranged in terms of b and a, b into x1 minus a by b to the like greater integer function, like in C++, into y1 plus a into y1 equal to GCD of a comma b. Now you can see that equation 1 and equation 3 are very similar. So what we get is that we can compare the variables and we get x equal to y1 and y equal to x1 minus uh, a by b into y. y1. So this is a very important relation, like from equating value for one for same GCD for two numbers and same GCD for two other numbers. You can relate it with the equation, like there is a relation between them. The coefficient have a relation. So this plays a very important role. Uh, Earlier you have studied that for आशीष नॉइस आ रहा है म्यूट कर दो हाँ extended Euclidean algorithm what we does that it follows a similar technique of like like in Euclid's algorithm like calculating b for calculating GCD of a comma b you can calculate GCD of b comma a mod b and when the b is found to be 0 you return a. So similarly here d x y are globally declared. So when b is found to be 0 you are putting d equal to a and that becomes a GCD. But GCD can be found easily by Euclid's algorithm. So why we are using extended Euclid? That may be the question that may arise in your mind if you think more sincerely. So we are doing it because we want that linear equation coefficient because it relates the GCD with A and B. So as we have studied in the previous slide that there is an equation that established between one GCD of A comma B and another GCD of B comma A mod B. So we can relate them at each level and at each level like in the last stage we found that x equal to 1 and y equal to 0 because at this stage B comes out to be 0 and GCD is A. So GCD comes out to be A, so its equation can be written as A into 1 plus B into 0. So you can easily write coefficient at this stage as x equal to 1 and y equal to 0. So what you can do is that suppose a previous call is made as a recursive function, so you can update the values by the equation that we have studied earlier for the x and y for b comma a mod b GCD. You can change the value of x to y and y to x minus a by b into y. Here temp is used because x is going to be changed, so we are storing it earlier so that the previous x is going to be used here. So this extended Euclid's algorithm not only gives us a GCD in log log n complexity, but it also gives us the coefficient of a and b. So there may be a question that may arise in your mind that why we need x and y. So x and y are not a common number; they are actually the solution of that equation. And that equation is usually known as linear Diophantine equation. So earlier we have studied that for suppose you want to do a into a by b mod c. So for that you can't do a mod c divided by b mod c in multiplicative inverse for doing multiplicative case. So here what is required is that you need to calculate modular multiplicative inverse in this case. So this x and y coefficient that we have found earlier plays major role. You can easily find the inverse by using one of the coefficient by dividing. Here you can see that a mod inverse can be easily found using extended Euclid's theorem. Hello, hello, Yatharth, can you turn off your mic?
You carry on. I'll take it.
Yeah, so if you want to calculate mod inverse, so you can call extended Euclid's algorithm and it will give you the value of GCD x and y. So you can use that x value to actually uh, get the inverse modulo multiplicative inverse by the use of extended Euclidean algorithm. So what you can do, you can x mod m plus m. You need to add an extra m because you may find the coefficient may be negative because x and y can be found to be negative in that case. So after doing x mod m plus m mod n, you get the inverse of modulo multiplicative inverse. So there is some condition that modulo multiplicative inverse only exists only when a and m were found to be co-prime. Like GCD of a comma m equal to 1. This is an essential condition for calculating modulo multiplicative inverse. So suppose a into b mod m equal to 1, then that b is actually said to be as the modular multiplicative inverse of a. Usually it is written as a inverse. So instead of uh, suppose you want to do a by b, suppose a mod you want to do a by b mod c, so you can, what you can do is that you can take a mod c and then multiply it with b inverse mod c and then take the whole mod c. So it is a very essential property for calculating modulo arithmetic to deal with very large numbers in cryptography and maybe and also in competitive programming. Mm, Now we are going to discuss about Fermat-Little theorem. And this theorem says that if a is raised to the power of p and then you subtract it with a, and p is a prime number, and for any integer a, suppose you raise a to the power of p and then subtract a to it, then it comes out to be a multiple of p prime. So so now taking a modulus with p, you can say that a mod p or a to the power p is found to be congruent with a mod p, the congruence thing that we have studied earlier in the slide. So a raised to the power p is found to be congruent with a mod p. So the necessary condition for here is that p needs to be prime and GCD of a comma p needs to be 1 in this case. According so Fermat-Little theorem is actually, suppose you multiply both the sides with a to the power minus 1, like a inverse. So the first left hand side becomes a raised to the power of p minus 1, and right hand side becomes a 1, actually becomes 1. So a raised to the power p minus 1 is found to be congruent with 1 mod p. So this is what we say what we say as Fermat-Little theorem. So what is the use of it? Mm, it is used in like public keys in cryptography, public key related stuffs, and also in primarity testing that we are going to discuss later on. So Fermat Little theorem is also used can be used to find inverses also. Suppose you can say that a raised to the power p minus 1 is found to be in congruence with 1 mod p. So if if you multiply both sides again with a to the power of minus 1, so right hand side becomes a raised to the power minus 1 and the left hand side becomes a raised to the power p minus 1. So now you can say that a raised to the power minus 1, that is the inverse of a, then is actually equal to the a raised to the power p minus 2 whole mod p. So this is, so we have studied earlier about modular exponentiation, like we can calculate x to the power n mod p in log n. So what we can do is that we can take the benefit of that to calculate the modulo multiplicative inverse. So for calculating inverse, you can actually raise, if you want to calculate inverse, you can raise a to the power of p minus 2 and you can get the answer. But here you can only use this algorithm only when p is found to be prime. Okay, when p is found to be prime, you can only use this algorithm. This is a necessary condition for that. So if p is found to be prime, so in that case you can calculate x to the power of n mod c by using modular exponentiation. And by you can sorry, you can found the inverse by taking the power with p minus 2. For if you want to calculate a inverse, so what you can do is that you can, if you want to take inverse under modulo b, so you, what you can do is that you can raise a to the power of b minus 2 and use modular exponentiation and get the result. Now coming on to the prime numbers. In the extended Euclidean algorithm, you may find it a little bit tougher, but after going through it like 2 to 3 times and using your pen and paper, you may writing equations and taking some examples, you can understand it. Now coming on to the prime numbers, you all of you have known the prime numbers are those numbers which are divided only by 1 and prime number itself. So suppose you know that 2, 3, 5, 7 are prime numbers because they are only divisible by 1, 2, sorry, 2 divisible by 1, 2, 3 divisible by 1, 3, while 4, 6, 8, 9, 10 are not prime because they have a factor that is between 1 and 4. 1 and it means that there is factor exit, so they are not said to be prime. So prime number are very important when you deal with competitive programming or cryptography, because it is a necessary thing whether you want to factorize the numbers or you want to optimize a problem. And also in primary testing and public key cryptography, these things are used extensively. So some prime numbers are given like 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. You all of you know about this. So all of you all of you have known that any number can be represented as a power of some primes, like 91 can be represented as 7 into 13. 12 can be represented as 2 to the power 2 into 3. So any number present, any integer greater than 1 can be represented as like some prime to the power of something into another prime raised to the power of something. So this is what we can use for prime factorization. So this is known as prime factorization. We break the numbers in the powers of prime factors. So primarity testing. What is primarity testing? Primarity testing is to test whether a number is prime or not. So we are need to find whether sometime whether a number is prime or not. So um, so the naive approach for this maybe is that you all of you know that prime is a number which has a factor between 2 and n minus 1. So you can take a loop from 2 to the power 2 to n minus 1, and you can check whether if it is divisible by one number or not, any number or not. If it is found to be divisible by any number in between that range, so you can return simply that it is not a prime number. And in the end, if you have not found any factors in the range like 2 to n minus 1 that can divide that number, so that number definitely becomes prime. So this is a naive approach to find whether a number is prime or not. Coming onto a more better algorithm. Coming on to a more better algorithm. mm, Instead of going from 2 to n minus 1, we can instead of go from 2 to the 2 to root n actually. Why? Because suppose you have been given number 2, 12. So 12 can be written as multiple in the as a product of two numbers in 1 into 12, 2 into 6, 3 into 4, 4 into 3, 6 into 2, 12 into 1. So neglecting 1 into 12 because 1 will be definitely going to divide. So 2 into 6 and 3 into 4, we can see that after that it is going to repeat. So if a factor exceeds less than root n, suppose less than root 12, okay, root root 12 can be found by 3 point something. So if it exceeds less than equal to 3, so we can go from 2, 3. We only need to check 2 and 3. So if one number is found to be 2, then another number, suppose you are breaking n into product of two numbers and one is found to be less than root n, then another is definitely going to be greater than root n. So this is a very important property that is used to optimize the primarity testing. So uh, as you can see in the function, instead of going from 2 to n minus 1, we are going to 2 to square root of n. And if any number is found that divides n, so we return the value false. And at last, if we does not found any number that can divide n, so then the number becomes automatically true. So So we get benefit of the thing that any number can be if a product of two numbers, and if one number is less than root n, and so another number is going to be greater than root n. So instead of going again from root n to n, we can only go from 2 to root n and optimize our code to root n complexity. Complexity means that this code is going to be take much lesser operations and time uh, relative to that of naive approach. Coming on to sieve of Eratosthenes themes, uh, what it does that it is a very popular sieve algorithm. Like it is used to if efficiently calculate all the prime numbers in a range. Like we have studied earlier, we can find if number is prime or not in root n. So if we need to calculate uh, like many of the numbers to check whether it is prime or not, it is prime or not. So if we if we do the same thing every time, so suppose you want to do it in many times, so each time you are going to perform the root n like heavy operation, so it may cost you a very large number of operation, and it will increase your time to compute the things, and maybe your computer cannot find that. So you can use the sieve approach. So what sieve does is that sieve makes an array. Suppose you want to calculate, you want to find a range n, and you want to calculate like from 1 to n whether a number is prime is not is prime or not. So what sieve does is that it tells you all those numbers that are present up to a range. Like if you pass a number, like you want to calculate all the numbers which are prime up to 10 to the power 7, so it will give you all the numbers present up to about 10 to the 7. You don't need to check for each number separately. So what it does is that it builds an array of size n, and it marks all the numbers to be prime. Like it marks that yes, it is prime, true, prime is prime equal to true, suppose. So it marks all the things to be true. Of course, one is not going to be prime, so it marks, you can it marks like one is not a prime. Then it goes to two, so it sees that two is a prime. So two remains prime, and what it does that it marks all the factors, all the multiples of two has a not prime number. Because if two is a prime, so all the multiples of two is definitely going to be a not prime number. So like you can see here that we go to initially all are marked prime 2, 3, 4, 6 up to 16. In this example, you can see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up to 16 all are marked prime. Then you go to 2, then you marked all the multiples 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 up to 16 has not prime. Then you can increment the pointer, like you can go to the next value 3, then you can change, sorry, then you can go to 3, and 3 is also prime, and 3 is not marked false, so it becomes automatically false because no number is lesser than that has divided it till yet. So you marked 3 as 3 is already marked prime. So you what you do is that you mark the multiples of 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 8, and so on as not prime number. Then you go to 4. 4 is already marked not prime, so you continue going forward. Then you move to 5, and 5 is not marked, so 5 is found to be prime. Then you make all the multiples of 5, 10, 15 has uh, not prime. Then you move to 6. 6 is not uh, 6 is found to be not 6 is found to be not prime. So yeah, then you go to 7. 7 is found to be not prime. Sorry, 7 is found to be prime. You then update mark the value of the multiples 14 as not prime. In a similar way, you approach from 2 to n, and at last you get the array, and that array has marked all the numbers that are prime or not prime. So this is a brief intro of how the sieve algorithm works. So coming on to the code, Yeah, so you can see here that we have declared an array which takes the parameter n plus 1. And so this is going to fill check whether numbers from 1 to n are prime or not. So initially you mark all the numbers as true, that is prime I equal to true, I from 0 to n, yes, all the numbers are true, prime. Then you manually fill like 0 and 1 are false. Then what you do is that you go for a for loop from 2 to less than n, and you check if it is found to be prime, as we have studied earlier in that example from 2 to 16. You go to 2 and you see that it is prime, okay, then you mark all the multiples to be not prime, like multiples, like if you start from I into I, so you then in the next time you check from I into I plus 1, I into I plus 2, so you update the value plus every time by I. So you are actually marking the multiples of I as not prime. So similarly you iterate for all the values. If a number is found to be prime, so you mark all its multiples to be not prime. So why if number is found to be true, why it is true? Because if it was not true, then it was not prime, then it was already been divided by a number before that is prime. So if it is comes out to be not marked as false, so it is definitely going to be prime. And in the second condition, you are starting from I into I, because suppose you start from I into I minus 1, then as you know that I minus 1 may be a factor of something. If I minus 1 is I minus 1 is divided actually as a multiple of I minus 1, I into I minus is a multiple of actually I minus 1. So if it was this, so it is not a prime, because it is marked false in the previous stage when you are marking false to the multiple of I minus 1. So its complexity is about like n log of log n, and it takes a array of n size, so its memory comes out to be on. Coming on to the Fermat primarity test, this test is actually used for large numbers, like suppose you can easily calculate like 10 to the power 6. Suppose you want to calculate large numbers, so for that case you need to use Fermat primarity test. It is not actually a like 100% guaranteed solution. It is a probabilistic method, like there may be a certain possibility of error that this solution fall may fail. Like it is actually non-deterministic in nature. What it does is that it takes some k, it picks some random suppose if number k, and for k times it takes any number in the range from 1 to n. It is actually based on a Fermat-Little theorem that we have studied earlier, that a raised to the power p minus 1 is found to be in congruence with 1 mod p. 1 mod p when p and a are found to be co-prime and p is a prime number. Uh, it has a extensive use to find the multiplicative inverse. And at that stage, we have studied that, yeah, it is also used in primarity testing. So this is that thing that we use to find primarity test. So what it says is that suppose we take k random numbers mm, and we select some number in a range from 2 to p minus 2 and apply this Fermat primarity test. So what it does is that picks a random number k and picks a random number in range from of 2 to p minus 2. Suppose if p is a prime, you want to check whether it is prime or not. So it takes the number 2 to the power 2 to p minus 2, and then it checks the whether you see model exponentiation on any algorithm. It checks whether x to the power of n minus 1 is found modulo n is found to be 1 or not. So if it is found to be not 1, that we then we certainly know that, yeah, it is not, p is not a prime, it is a composite number, so we can return it as a composite number. So after some k times of this random picking of numbers, like k times of loop, if at the end it is found that, yeah, uh, it is not a composite number, so it is said to be, yes, as a probably prime number, like it may be prime, and in most of the cases actually it is found to be prime, I think. uh, it is not a 100% correct method, but yeah, it has a certain kind of error, but usually you can see that it finds mostly all the numbers in very efficient manner. Uh, you can calculate very fastly by using this method. This is actually used for very large number, maybe. So for more interest, you can uh, go through this link, Fermat primarity test, Wikipedia's blog, and you can also check other primarity tests from this link, CP algorithms. This is a great site from where you can study algorithms related to number theory, or whether also talking about like competitive programming also. So these are some sources. Dinesh, Dinesh, hello.
Hello.
या
Yeah.
एक yes.
टाइम है ना, एक्स्ट्रा टॉपिक डिस्कस कर सकते हैं ना ये?
हाँ कर लेना, कंप्लीट कर लेना.
ठीक है, ओके. सो कमिंग ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट टॉपिक, Euler-Tocent function. So what is Euler-Tocent function? Uh, Euler-Tocent function is also known as phi n. What phi n is that, suppose if a number is n, so phi n is the numbers in the range from 1 to n that are co-prime to 1. We have studied earlier that co-primes are the numbers that gives GCD equal to 1. Yeah, so that are the numbers that give GCD with n. So up to 1 to n, whichever numbers are found to be co-prime are counted in this case. So it returns the number of co-primes actually in that range. Suppose in the example n is equal to 10. So you know that 1, 3, 7, 9 are co-prime because their GCD with n is equal to 1. So it will return 4 because this set size is 4. So this is the thing that phi n calculates, or you can say that Euler-Tocent function calculates. So uh, suppose if a number is prime number p, so you know that all the numbers less than prime are definitely going to give uh, GCD 1 because there is no factor that divides. So definitely you are going to get GCD equal to 1, and definitely 1 is also going to give you GCD 1 because GCD is of 1 and anything is definitely going to be 1. So in that case, phi of p comes out to be p minus 1 in case of prime numbers. Uh, so this is a very important property. And talking about, like, we know that any number can be represented as p to the power of k, prime multiplication of primes. Like we know that any number can be represented at different primes raised to some power, and multiplied together. So suppose if any prime taken from that is, like, suppose if a number is uh, certain power of k to a prime, like if a number is p to the power k, so calculating uh, 5 value of that is actually very easy. So we can you can exclude the values that are uh, that gives GCD not 1. So all the numbers in the range are p to the power k. Suppose 5 p to the power k, all the numbers are p to the power k, and you are minusing the neglecting differencing the value of all the numbers that are multiple. So you know that p to the power k, suppose 2 to the power 4. So when you divide 2 to the power 4, you know that 2 to 4 by 2, you know that 2 to the power 3 multiples are present which are less than equal to 2 to the power k, 2 to the power 4. So 2 to the power 3 numbers are actually present that are multiple. You can check this by the simple math, like numbers that are not for 2 to the power 4 example, numbers that are not co-prime co-prime. So there are 2 to the power 3 numbers actually, because you can divide 2 to the power 4 by 2, and so in that multiple every time a factor is going to come. So 2 to the power 3 values are there. So this tells us about the formula that p to the power k can be easily 5 of p to the power k can be easily written as p to the power k minus p to the power of k minus 1. So this is a very extensively used thing, because by using this we can write any number, we can break any number, because we any number is actually a prime power to something. And there is another property of a Euler-Tocen function is that phi of a into b can be written as phi a into phi b. So using this two algorithm, we can write phi Euler-Tocen function of any value, because any number is a power of prime of something and product of another prime of something. So you can use the last value, last function, and also the second last function to break it, like that we are going to see in this. Suppose n is a prime, suppose n is p1 into raised to power some a1, and into p2 raised to power something a2, and similarly p3 p4, then moving up to pk power k, so a to power ak. So any number can be represented in this way. So now calculating phi n becomes very easy, because in the previous slide we know that phi of um, whole p1 a1 into p2 to the power a2, and similarly up to pk to the power k ak can be simply, we can exclude like phi of a into b is actually equal to phi of a into phi of b. So we can break that phi for everything. So phi of n can be now written as phi of p1 raised to power a1 into phi of p2 raised to power a2 into some similarly going on and into phi pk to the power of ak. So, and we also know that phi of p1 raised to the power a1 is in from the previous slide, that p to the power k minus p to the power k minus 1. So now we can break it as p to the power a1 minus p to the power a1 minus 1. So similarly for other terms also. So now phi n can be represented, now taking p1 to the power a1 common from first, and p2 to the power of a2 from second. Similarly from all the terms, we get this, the last second line. So we can easily think that any number is actually power of p1 to power a1, p to power a2 multiplied similarly. So if we divide, mm, if we multiply, mm, so if we have taken common p1 raised to power a1 and p2 raised to power a2, so we can take that as common and write it as n, that you can see in the last line n. So all the colors that are marked with blue that are taken common, that are actually n. Okay, from the first line you can see that they are n, so they are written as n, and then the rest of thing is p1 minus 1 by p1 into p2 minus 1 by p2, and then up to pk minus 1 by pk. So you can calculate Euler-Tocen function of any number by multiplying n with all the prime factors that are all the prime factors of it, uh, using prime factors. Like, you suppose you want to calculate for 2, so you what you can do is that you can 2 into 2 minus 1 by 2. Similarly for any number you can calculate this way by using the all the prime factors. So in this way you can find all the Tocen function. You can definitely code a code now what is a how we can calculate prime and how we can find a prime factors. So if you can find a prime factor, then now you can also find the all the Tocen function value, because in a similar way, yeah, if you go up to root 10 complexity, you can find it root 10. If you want to see use sieve, then you can also similarly use sieve for that also. So it depends upon you, like how much you want to optimize the code according to the need. Coming on to our important thing at last is that Euler theorem. Euler theorem is what it says, that the Euler-Tocen function phi n, when we raise a to the power of Euler-Tocen function, so it is found to be congruent with 1 mod n. if A and M are relatively prime, means GCD of A and N are equal to 1. So this is known as Euler's theorem. This is a very important theorem. Like you can, for calculating, if you want to calculate three GCD of three, if you know that A equal to 3 and N equal to 10, so you know that phi of 10 equal to 4, because four numbers are relatively prime from 1 to n. So Euler tangent of 10 is 4. Euler tangent of 10 is 4. So now you can calculate 3 to the power 4, which comes out to be 81, and taking mod with 10 equal to 1. So you can see that these equations hold for any number. So it is very interesting to find that it is actually a very generalized equation of Fermat's theorem that we have studied earlier. The Fermat's theorem that like a raised to power of p minus 1 is found to be in congruence with 1 mod p. So information. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So what we can do is that if we suppose for a prime number, if n is prime, so we know that Euler-Tangent function phi of n is definitely n minus 1. Okay, so for case of prime, phi of n becomes n minus 1. So the Euler theorem becomes a to the power of n minus 1 in congruence with 1 mod n. So you can say that for the case of prime numbers, uh, the Euler theorem becomes Fermat's theorem. So also Euler theorem is more generalized in nature. Yeah, so the Euler theorem becomes Fermat's theorem when n becomes prime, and you can use it to find inverse of numbers. Like you can multiply both sides by a inverse, so you can get inverse by a raised to power of p minus 2 if p is a prime. Okay, so I think that this is enough for today's workshop. We have discussed a slide like Python, um, for your like basic stuff, and number theory. Number theory, you will find number theory actually this algorithms extensively used in like competitive programming events, and also in cryptography. Like if you find this number theory is very much common, like Diophantine equation and uh, other stuffs are very common in advanced cryptography, and like solving crypto related problems that involves number theory. So this number theory is not going to come, it's not only going to come in like competitive programming event, this is also going to help in the maths also. Like if you want to study any algorithms, you need to be like know about how the number theory is banded, like how the complexity, how certain functions are going to work. So so number theory plays a very important role even in puzzles also. There may any amount of puzzles can be made from number theory, because there are enough thing in number theory. So if anyone has doubts, so they can turn on your mic and ask about any doubt. And hello.
Yes, guys. So anyone who has any doubts can ask right now. Otherwise, you're free to go.
No,
And
no, no,
also, no,
everybody
is
wait
there
1 second.
okay.
Actually there is a contest, practice contest, that is going to be held related to the thing that we have discussed, like number theory mostly, and some basic basic programming related thing, like basic STL and basic programming. So basic maths and number theory that we have discussed and all the stuff. So we are going to hold a contest in a week before December maybe. So there is a contest, competitive programming contest, that is going to be held at in a week actually. So we if most of you have found any difficulties in any lecture or um, any part, you can follow CP algorithm book, CP algorithm site, that was given in a page. So CP algorithms have listed all the things related to number theory, and you can also follow Hacker Earth or other platforms to understand number theory. So there is a content that is going to be held within a week, maybe. So get prepared for that. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can watch this movie, The Imitation Game, by Benedict, if you want to get some interest in crypto and number theory. Of course, number theory is going to play an important role, whether talking about in like computer programming or number puzzles or interview or anything. I think good knowledge of number theory is definitely what companies want to be you good at, because number theory is needed. So yeah, that's all I think from my side. Dinesh, if you want to
Yeah.
conclude.
So for the second yearites, you might understand how important this workshop was. And regarding the contest, we'll give out a formal matlab, message as well as to when this will happen. So I expect participation from all the second yearites. Those who are not present here also, please intimate them to access the resources. All the resources regarding whatever links he was mentioning, and you know the PPTs will be uploaded by tonight on the Udyam 21 channel. And also do watch this movie, it's a very great one. And for the doubts, yeah, anyone who has doubts can ask. Ayush, go ahead please.
I didn't understand that the Euler-Torsion function of n p raised to n is p raised to n
Yeah,
minus p raised to n minus 1 wala formula. That formula.
yeah. Which 1 second.
Second last line on that slide.
This formula.
Oh,
Hello, hello.
Yeah,
yes, I'm
yeah,
there.
I guess you are visible, you are
Yeah,
audible.
yeah. So you can see an example. Suppose you want to calculate. You know that Euler-Torsion function is that all the numbers that give GCD with GCD one with that number. So suppose take an example like two to the power four. If you want to calculate like two is a prime and raised to the power four. So if you can want to evaluate Euler-Torsion function of two to the power four. So what you can do is that you can minus, you know that all the numbers that are in the range are 2 to the power 4, so you can minus the numbers that are that not give GCD equal to 1. Okay, so not talking about what numbers not give GCD equal to 1 are that numbers that are multiple of that prime, like if you want to calculate 2 to the power 4, then multiples will be like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So for 2 to the power 4 you can get all the multiples by dividing like 2 to the power 4 by 2. Okay, so these numbers are going to be give GCD of 2, not 1. So you can minus this number from total range actually. Are you getting what I'm saying? Hello?
Yes,
Yeah, yes.
understood a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, suppose now 2, 2, 4, 6, 8 are the factors, so that are not going to give GCD equal to 1. So you can instead of evaluating direct, you can minus that. Like suppose suppose we have taken 8. So 8 is actually 2 raised to power of 3. So numbers that are not going to give GCD 1 are what? 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8. So how much number? 8 by 2, that are 4. 1 to 4 8 are not giving 1 to 4 8 are not going to give GCD. So how many numbers are there? 4. So you can divide 8 by 2. So
Got it.
it's got to be 4. Okay.
Then who else was also raising their hand? If anyone else, they can ask. And also, do remember to fill the feedback form that is in the general channel, or regarding whatever feedback you have, you can answer there, and we'll evaluate and improve as accordingly. Other than that, regarding the contest, we'll give out a formal announcement, and I expect at least the second year must participate. Even the first year can participate and have a look about what all CP is and what is the buzz behind it. You'll get an idea. So I recommend all of you to participate in that. If
Yeah.
anyone else has any more doubts, you can ask, or otherwise, I guess you're free. Aditya?
Yeah.
भैया